Sue and I are from Toledo. She is the second of four. My mom had my brother when she was, when my mom was 19. She had Sue when she was 20. Sue was a difficult delivery. So when she was born, she wasn't breathing, and because she wasn't breathing, it caused cerebral palsy. My mom told me the story just the other night that she gave birth to Sue, and normally the doctors or the nurses come back with your little baby and they hand you the baby. And my mother, instead of getting a visit from the nurse with the baby, she got two doctors coming in and telling her that essentially Sue was damaged, severe brain damage. She wouldn't ever be able to accomplish anything. They didn't really know what was wrong with her other than the fact that there was damage. And, you know, my mom said she felt that they were just basically saying, sorry, but we're not going to give you a baby. We're going to give you something else. She came home from the hospital and with her baby, and it's so remarkable to me because of the things that people have nowadays in terms of care, and she would have been in an EQ unit probably for months, but 2 weeks after her birth, they hand her to my mom and say, well, this is how we feed her here. Take her home and do what you can. And she has cerebral palsy, so she has dysphagia, and every muscle in her body doesn't do what it's supposed to do. It just kind of does its own thing. And my mom was 20 years old with this baby and already had a year-old baby at home. I think what's really important about Sue's story is that when my mom walked in the house, because at the time my mom was living with my grandmother and grandfather, my dad's parents, and when she walked in the house with Sue, my grandmother said to her, and my grandmother knew that something was wrong, but she said, my baby, let me hold my baby. Which, you know, she was valued. From the moment she stepped into the family, she was valued. Just a bone of contention, she was my grandmother's favorite. You know, my grandmother would come over with a beautiful dress for her, and I got paper dolls, you know. One of the stories my mom told me is that when she was a year, they took her to a neurologist, and the neurologist said she has CP. And the neurologist said, she has CP, she'll be deaf, she won't know anybody, she won't know anything, she's not going to have anything. And my mom said she was laying out on that blanket with Mike one day, and my mom was inside the house doing dishes, watching them through the window, and she said she saw Sue start getting excited and moving. And a couple minutes later, maybe a couple seconds later, my dad's car came in the driveway. And my mom said she thought about that, and she thought, wow, that's kind of interesting. The next day, when my dad came home from work, it happened again. Sue got all excited, she smiled, and my dad would, you know, get out of the car and walk to the blanket and pick her up and talk to my brother Mike and that. And then she said to my dad, I don't think she's deaf because she hears you coming before I hear you coming. So I don't think she's deaf. I think she can hear. What was recommended is put her away. And basically she'll have no value to your family. Put her away. My parents had nothing to compare it to. There wasn't a support group or whatever, so that they weren't talking to parents. From my mom and dad's standpoint, she was their child. She was their child and their loved one. They couldn't put her away and do that. That was just unthinkable. My mom felt very strongly that Sue needed to get an education because although all the doctors and everybody told her that there was nothing there, my mom said she knew. She knew that Sue had cognitive ability. My mom felt very strongly that she should go to school. Well, she tried Toledo Public Schools. That's where my brothers were both in school. And she tried that, and no, we can't, there's nothing there for her because she's disabled, and everybody felt she had no cognitive functioning. They talked to somebody that recommended that they take her down to the Columbus Developmental Center, because what the doctors said is they have a wonderful school down there for kids like Sue. Columbus Developmental Center is a state-run institution for people with disabilities. And imagine the state-run institution 50 years ago. So my mom and dad went down there, and my mom said they walked onto a unit, and there were children just sitting. There were no toys. The furniture was sparse. Some kids had little to no clothing on. They were sitting and rocking and self-stimulating. And my mom looked around and said, "Where's the school?" And a staff member came up to my mom and said, "There's no school here." And my mom said, "But I'm looking for a place where my child can get an education." And the staff person said, "Honey, don't bring her here. This isn't where you need to bring your daughter." Sue was used to a family and interactions. She didn't have a life where my mom put her on a chair and just left her there and walked away from her. My mom interacted with her, or my brothers and I interacted with her. My mom found a school. All I know is that it was Mrs. Friend's school. And it was in what used to be the St. Anthony's Villa, but apparently St. Anthony's Villa used to be a children's hospital. And there was a classroom within that setting, and that's where Sue went to school. My mom had to drive her there and back every day. My dad was a railroader and worked 16 hours a day. So he obviously had a role and was supportive. But for me, my dad's role was more in family vacations or when we went out and did something. Every Sunday, if my dad was off work, we went for a ride to wherever in the country or whatever, and the highlight was always finding a Franklin's ice cream store on the way back. Sue would sit in the front seat, and my brothers and I would sit in the back seat, and we would just drive. It was entertainment for a family that was sinking a lot of money into physical therapy and OT and all those things. Because when she got older, she actually did get services of that nature, speech therapy, physical therapy. But for my parents, it was all private pay. My father's relationship with Sue was the same as with all of us. And for Sue, there were very, very real expectations. It wasn't as if we were a family of 3 normal kids and 1 disabled kid, and the disabled kid was treated differently. And I think the important part of that needs to be told is that Sue's, how she behaved, the expectation on her was no different than anybody else. If she did something wrong, if she threw a fit because, she couldn't have her way, my mom and dad were going to discipline her much the same they would have, any other naughty 3 or 4 or 5-year-old. The expectations they put on her is actually what helps her survive the disability. She was with Mrs. Friend until she was about 16 years old. And Mrs. Friend told my parents that she's met her plateau. There's nothing more I can do with her. And by that time, there's the Lucas County Board of MRDD and a school called Lark Lane. And they actually transferred her to Lark Lane. The school books went away. There were no more school books. So she wasn't taught. And they did things like teaching her manners, which my mom had that covered. She was about 16, and my mom said she cried every night when she went to bed at night because it was just such a different world. Her peers weren't fellow students anymore. They were kids that didn't behave the way she thought they should behave. because she was taught, you know, you don't scream, you don't yell, you don't lash out at somebody. She was with kids that didn't have those same expectations. 21, she went to Hefner, and it was a Lot Industries workshop type environment. Did you like Hefner? Yes. I think at Hefner, the staff, you like the staff, and it was more of like a family. She worked at Telegraph. Telegraph's another workshop. I think Hefner closed or became something different, and she actually went to a work environment where there was actual paid work. And we used to laugh because sometimes she'd bring her paycheck home and it'd be like 50 cents or 75, and if she hit $1, we kind of went like, whoa, Sue, you're doing really well. I think it's important to know that my mom, from the time she was a child, wanted to be a nurse. And my dad always told her she had to be a stay-at-home mom. Well, when I went to kindergarten, I was 5, Sue was 13, Mike was 14. My mom decided that she was going to go and get her GED and go to LPN school. That was her dream. She wanted to be a nurse. She left us every night in the care of either my dad or Mike. Here's my mom with 4 kids. One of them has severe disabilities, but is still saying, this is important to me. I'm going to make this work for the family, and that's essentially what she did. One of the things my mom told me just recently is that we all kind of figured out how to do it. You know, whether it be Mike staying home in the evenings until she got home, or, you know, working with my dad's schedule because the railroad calls at any time, just working that out on how we're going to figure that out and what we're going to do was a family effort, you know. We all kind of pitched in to do it. And, you know, we learned how to feed her. We learned how to take her to the bathroom. We learned how to do all those things because we were family, and that's what we did. My parents retired in maybe 92. In 92, my mom and dad moved down to Florida. They decided that that's where they wanted to be. And initially, they went back and forth, and Sue would go with them in the winter, and they would come back in the summertime. And then there was a time where they would go to Florida, but they would leave Sue with me and my family. And I think around 94, I said to my mom, you know, I think you're getting too old to do this. And I said, you know, I think I should take this responsibility on now because you're getting old, go to Florida, have fun, whatever. My mom's initial reaction was, no, you can't do this. At the time, I had 2 children. You know, one was 3, one was 1. And she said no. And I said, well, really, it's not your decision. It's my decision and Sue's decision, and we think this is going to work. So she's going to come live with me. So we did that. I think it was good for both of us. I think with me, she got something that my parents would never have agreed to. She got a power chair. This is not her normal wheelchair. She has one that she can move on her own. My parents would have been they would have thought, no, it's too much, too dangerous. You have to look back at our history. Strict parents, by the time I got there, more progressive parents. My daughter is the type of child that if you tell her something, she's going to argue with you. And if you tell her no, she's going to ask why. She's going to want to know the details. And we were at dinner one night, and my daughter started, I said something, my daughter asked me a question, and I told her no, and she starts in, but why, Mom, blah, 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 blah. And you can watch Sue. When Sue gets nervous and tense, she starts stiffening up like this. I know that the child is not going to get her way, but I'm not opposed to her expressing her frustration. Sue's feeling is that you're the mom, you told her no, shut the hell up. I had to try to get to what the issue was. Why is she so upset that I'm yelling at my kids? And when it was all said and done and we actually sat down and talked about it, it was fear. It was fear that my kids were taking it to a point that I was going to spank them. And I had to say to her, have you ever seen me spank the kids? And have I? Should I? You're not going to get the nuances, and she's not going to be expressive here, but she has lots and lots and lots of, this is what people don't understand. You know, the doctors told my mom and dad she had no cognitive ability. She designed language. That's pretty high. That's pretty high cognitive functioning. All the little signs that she has, my mom didn't say to her, make a fist and hold this up to your mouth and that'll be drink. She figured that out. So what I do is she's going like this, school, and she'll go, no. Work, no. And then I have to think, where in the heck does she go that respite? Yes. It's mom. But why? That's what you do to the people you love. You kiss them. You have to know all the little nuances. You have to know what's going on in her life, what she's worried about, what she is concerned about. I'm 52 years old. I'm getting older. Sue is very, very healthy. And I've come to realize, I promised my mom that I would always take care of Sue. She would always be in my home. But and she lived with us for about 15 years, maybe a little more, 15. What my mom kept saying to me is, you can't do this forever. And my mom knew, you can't do this forever. My mom calls me Lynn. You can't do this forever, Lynn. According to state funding, she's automatically gets less funding when she lives in the home with me, because in the eyes of the state, she has me. So I can't say I need more funding because I want to do more. I want to work on the weekends, or I want to do this or that. We're locked into a funding range because she lives with me. So about a year ago, and it's been actually about a year ago, we decided to look at services that are out in the community. And we called up a service provider and said, can we just look at some of your group homes and see what's out there? Well, as fate would have it, they had an opening. This is a good provider. It's an excellent provider. And what we decided is that we're going to take this step now. And our rationale, my mom and I's rationale was, this is going to be a very, very difficult move for her, because at the time she was 59, going on 60, had always lived in a family home. And my mom and I both felt that if my mom and I are both capable, then we can help her through this. We can be a support to her rather than something happening to me. So now she lives at a group home. And if you want her to be expressive, she'll tell you about the group home. Do you like living in the group home? You have to be truthful. What is it about the group home you don't like? Remember what this is the sign for? Baby. What about being a baby? You feel like a baby? Dislike? You dislike it? Or they dislike you? You dislike the home. One of the other stories you did, and one of the stories that Sue and I just actually watched it today, there's a relationship between those two people. That's what Sue's looking for. This staff person, her name was Mahalia, she understood Sue. With Mahalia, she's an adult. And the other day when I was talking with her and asking her, what is it about the group home you don't like? What she said is, she pointed to this and she said, I am little.